Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out and sharing this Thursday night with us. We really appreciate that. And we think it's going to be a conversation that you're all just going to dig into, and we want you to walk away with lots of tidbits and feel grounded. But before we start, we always want to give our thanks to the Boston Museum of Science for, again, partnering with us. And again, let's hear a round of applause for James, who literally, we consider him to be a third member.
I know. And Bethany, who you saw.
And Bethany of ReRooted. So just want to say thanks to them. So this is I know the topic of this seems very heavy, right? So it's like, Unveiling the Divine, reclaiming the sacredness of Black bodies. That's pretty heavy. That's a heavy topic. And the genesis for that topic was I was going through a period in January when I was riddled with anger and fear and uncertainty. And I needed to know how to cope with that. I needed to figure out how to stay grounded in my body. And I started thinking about what can I reach out to? What kind of change of mind can I have? And I called Yvette up and I said, I think this is a topic that we should discuss, because if I'm feeling this way, then I'm sure lots of other people are feeling this way too. How are we grounding ourselves in this very difficult time? Where are we pulling from to ground ourselves? From ancestors, from the divine, from rituals? And so I wanted us to have a conversation about that and to share our stories and how we can tap into our peace.
And keep peace.
And keep peace, because I keep going, I don't know how we gonna make it. But fortunately and blessings, I have people around me who have said, we gonna make it.
Yeah, we gonna do this.
We gonna do this.
So welcome, everyone. We're gonna do this.
Yes.
So lovely to see so many familiar faces, so many faces I haven't seen. So thank you all for being here. As Michele was saying, divinity means different things for all of us. So we're not going to this conversation with one way of thinking of it. So we want you to join us in this conversation, not only in your presence, but in your words. And we will have time to communicate and engage together. But I want to, before we move on to the panel, can we give my sister Nadia Washington another round of applause? Nadia is a professor at Berklee College of Music. She's a renowned artist, jazz and R&B. She's recorded with Esperanza Spalding, Layla Hathaway, Diane Reeves, Terry Lynn Carrington, and the late George Duke. Born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and just an amazing artist. So thank you so much, sis, for joining us this evening. Our panel includes, I'm gonna bring her up, Dr. Tahira Abdullah, who is a professor at UMass Boston, clinical psychologist born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. Her work focuses on supporting Black mental health and well-being through community-based efforts, research, teaching, and consultations towards institutional change. And everything about her is divinity to me. So I'm so happy you'll be able to hear the vibration and the love in her voice that comes naturally. It's not just the conversation. Gio Costamaides is joining us, our brave young brother, who said yes right away, is a community engagement manager at Boston Ujima Project and an organizer for the Black Men's Collective of Boston. Born in Boston to immigrant parents from Greece and South Africa, but raised in Dorchester. So we have someone here from hometown, right? You gotta put the Dorchester in there. And at the closing, we will have the panel, we will have some Q&A. Then my dear colleague, Elizabeth DeBlanc, is here. And Elizabeth is the Afro-Latina who is the vice president at Embrace Boston with roots in arts and education. She holds, she's just amazing. And that's why you will hear her do our closing reflection for us. So let's get in it. We're ready? How y'all doing tonight?
Good.
Good.
Let me get my notebooks together. So I want to just jump right in. What does Black divinity mean to you personally? And Turhiro, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Thank you all for being here. When I think about Black divinity, in reflecting on this question, my mind went a number of ways. So the thing that I'll start with is our essence is divine. Black divinity to me means interconnectedness. It means Ubuntu. It means I am because we are, which to me has to do with a deeply rooted spiritual connection that Black people have with each other. When I think about Black divinity, I think about the ways that we have survived. I think about the ways that we have liberated ourselves and others and continue to do so and will continue to do so. When I think about Black divinity, one thing that I also have thought about is how oftentimes I feel like it's presented as a counter narrative, which in some ways it is, but also our divinity isn't just in opposition to what's been put upon us in terms of lack of divinity, or in terms of lack of civilization, or in terms of lack. Our divinity exists because it's inherent in us. And so those are the things that come to mind for me when I think about Black divinity.
Jill, for you?
Absolutely, and thank you for opening us up tonight. Black divinity really does feel like a healing space. It feels like somewhere like deep within my soul, where I'm able to feel and see perhaps some faces that are no longer materially with us. It's a space where I'm able to pray and meditate comfortably and be able really to take refuge in my Blackness. As someone with one Black parent, I think it's really important that people that share that experience don't see themselves as halves of anything, but an opportunity to say that I have a new way of being Black, and that's exclusive to my own self. And that in itself is like a divine revelation, and I wouldn't have gotten to that point and that continuous journey of Blackness being divine without speaking to other people and learning from prophets, past leaders, ancestors, and of course, the greatest Black divinity of all is nature itself, because it came from Blackness. And I'll just leave it there.
Michele.
Yes, thank you. For me, the essence of Black divinity is resilience. I think there's a wonderful spiritualness in the resilience that exists in Black people. And it's not just a strength, and it's not just a character. For me, our resilience is our connection to the divine. Our resilience is how the divine works through us. Our resilience is how the divine shapes our communities. And I think that's, no matter what socioeconomics, education, class, whatever, there's always that connecting that, whatever space that we're in, we always have to pull from the spiritualness of the resilience that keeps us going.
And all three of you mentioned it in an indirect way or a direct way. And one of the things that we have done in ReRooted is, and you saw Nadia start, it's always some form of libation to honor those whose shoulders we stand on and bringing that light in. How does your ancestral history, or how does your ancestors show up for you as you think about divinity? Michele, you want to start there?
I'm come from a mixed culture. So my father is a Black American and my mother is Panamanian. So I grew up in this mixed culture. A lot of my influence, my ancestral influence, the storytelling that I've investigated have come through my mother's side. And that's what I hold on to. I hold on to those women and men in my family who are grounded themselves. And for me, it's just something simple. Like, all of a sudden, I found myself very much into cooking. And the reason that's happening is because I feel such a connection, because I grew up in the kitchen. I grew up in the kitchen of listening to stories and hearing, grown women talk, and they're like, oh, you're in grown folks' business, but I'm at the kitchen table. Yeah, I'm at grown folks' business. I'm learning. And so that's been a wonderful thing to sort of tap into the process of cooking and the love and the feelings that go into cooking. And then recently, it's been things like prayer. I mean, I come from prayer warriors. And like my grandmother was, you didn't eat until you said your prayers. And she prayed for everybody. And we would it would take a long time. I remember I'd have to call my mother and be like, I'm hungry, grandma's still praying. I mean, she prayed for a long time. And for a long time, I dismissed that and thought it was just something old folks did when they got older. But I've come to realize that prayer really is a connection to myself, to my ancestors as well. And I'm happy to have been at the feet of these women to learn how to just surrender so openly and take other people to heart.
Ashe. Jill, ancestral energy, vibration.
Yeah, this is an excellent opportunity. I came up in a Christian religious household with two denominations at odds with each other at all times. I won't say what they are, just to respect that experience. Like, the ancestral gifts really showed up and continued, to empower me, as we continue to sit in our divine and experience that journey. Those gifts include definitely prayer. I remember when my grandma came to the United States, probably the second time, because she was there when I was born. So the second time when I was conscious of her being there, it was always a big deal to pray. And okay, everybody takes turns, and by the way, I'm 2. So I'm putting my hands together and I'm hitting them with the amen. And even though I'm not in that building for that particular tax-exempt, religious organization, I maintain that ancestral connection through those gifts. What are those gifts for me, and maybe perhaps for others? Definitely prayer, which I blend and view as intertwined with meditation. Music making, I definitely feel and hear energies and peoples, and you can take that with your grain of salt or seasoning, what have you, but I do know that I'm not alone when I'm music making, because for starters, there's an infinite amount of organisms around us all the time through nature, and whether or not we see and feel our ancestors vibrating in that same space and time, that's up to you. For me, I've decided that I can feel that, and I acknowledge their presence, and that actually helps me, stay rooted, rerouted, those in these spaces, because I had to uproot myself from my initial religious organization. And how did I stay rerouted? Actually, I just wanted to shout out a space that did exist materially for a few years in Roxbury. I'm from Dorchester, so what did I have to do on a Sunday? For a period of time, there was an excellent set of spiritually African-centered spaces called Ileashe. I see you, Mama Lula. Shout out to our elders who showed up, and all the Black women and folks who are here. Yes, and Ileashe really helped me be like, man, like I really don't have anything to do, Sunday 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., like what am I doing for my soul care? And so I found that my ancestors will be there when I'm engaged in soul care, which I see as intertwined with community care. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that. Taylor?
So for me, the connection to ancestors is a really pivotal piece and has morphed for me over time. I'm African American, which means that I do not specifically know who my ancestors are. And so for me early on, it almost felt like there was a disconnect, and I was searching and working to try to make connections that I didn't feel like were there. But it also was, for me, the case that when I stopped trying so hard, I felt it. And it wasn't a need to know the specifics of who. I didn't need to know names, that it was more of an experience of connection to an experience of a connection to my people as a whole that has felt really divine. And then also for me, I grew up in a multi-generational household. So grew up with my grandmother, lived in the house with us. And she passed away when right after I graduated high school. So she became an ancestor. And for me, as the people who I've been closest with, particularly the women that I've been closest with in my life, with my grandmother and my mother transitioning, there again was like a search for wanting to still maintain a connection and like an attempt to try to maintain a connection. And again, I noticed that when I stopped trying so hard, I felt it. And so for me, it has been through listening instead of trying to seek, just listening and receiving. And then also it has been through, doing what I would consider walking in their footsteps. So whether it is through things like cooking or baking, or through things like going to the spaces that I know that my ancestors were in, and listening, going to those spaces and walking the literal footsteps that they walked in, and listening to what I receive from that space. And that type of connection for me has felt really powerful, has felt really transformative, and has brought me a sense of peace and calm that, in the midst of loss, I didn't think was possible. In the midst of grief, I didn't think was possible. Another thing that has been a piece of this journey for me has also been becoming a parent myself, becoming a mother myself, and thinking about the things that I want to pass along and the connection that I want to pass along to my son, who never had the opportunity to meet my mother or my grandmother. And the ways that I pass that along are through sharing the things that they shared with me, sharing the experiences that they shared with me, sharing the knowledge that they shared with me. And so those are the things that for me have kept me and allowed me to maintain that ancestral connection.
And I threw that question at them just now, because I think that's a key piece in the times that we're in, to lean into the experience of the ancestors and knowing how they survived walking these streets. That it's almost, when you do a divination in Ifa and in any practice, it's what did the ancestors experience and what can we do differently, or what can we do equal to them. Ancestors has always been a part of my conversation in the family, born and raised in Panama, but two Caribbean parents. And if you're Caribbean, they talk about folks that die like they're gonna walk in the door. You know, we talk about my grandmother, who, you know, my middle name, and I remember like 8, 9 years old, like, when is Mama Mari coming? And they were like, she's not coming, I was like, but we talk about her like she's gonna walk in the door. So I grew up where you have a relationship with the ancestors. You have a relationship with those who have transitioned. And I learned that even more directly as my mom became an ancestor when I was only 14 years old. So it was a constant connection to that. And Dad transitioned now 4 years ago, and when you were talking around, and you were with me when the whole thing, Michele, but you saw me really raw through the whole thing, and it was my dad's spirit that led me to paint and to ground myself. So the divinity, the energy of the ancestors, as we talk about what we can do to ground ourselves to find peace, it is to lean into it. But what it requires too, is a sense of silence and solitude, to be able to hear the whispers, to be able to receive them without fear and take that guidance. So in that, what practices then do you put into place to ground yourself in your divinity, to connect to the ancestral divinity? And I'll start with you, too.
Yeah. So for me, it is about that stillness, which sometimes is hard to come by. I'm busy. Everything is always go, go, go. I have an almost 2-year-old. It can be hard to come by that stillness. And so for me, the times that I find that stillness that allows me to have that connection are, I will take time and go on a walk. And going on a walk is, it's so peaceful for me. Even if it's a walk that is to get me from point A to point B, when I go on walks, I don't put headphones in. I take in what's around me. I don't talk on the phone anymore when I'm walking. I really try to be more intentional and more mindful as I am walking, so that I am able to release more that's in my mind, that I am able to be more open to what might be coming in towards me. Another practice for me is, and maybe this is kind of in the line of walking too, but for me, being near water is something that really brings me peace. As a Floridian, I was always around water. My students know every time I'm in Florida, I'm like, I have to go to the beach. I have to put my feet in sand. I have to let the water, the waves, reach my toes, right? For me, that is a form of grounding. That is a place of connection. To me, also, coastlines, oceans, also have ancestral meaning. And being one with that and grounding in that is a thing that feels really powerful for me.
Gio, your practice?
Absolutely. I was gonna whip out the paper and all that, but I think I've read that enough. I have some practices to share, and the ones I'll highlight gonna have to be music making. So I currently do music for my own mental and spiritual health. I have a series of percussion items. I'll just name a few. I have a wonderful djembe that an elder gifted me. I have a set of congas that I purchased with one of those Trump checks back in the pandemic. You remember the type. And I mean, because some of these stuff is very expensive, you know? And then I have various percussion items from my travels, from New Orleans, from Havana, Cuba, from Jamaica, and from South Africa, respectively. And that music making really does, like, you know, do it for me. And what is that? It has to be maintaining my spiritual health so that I can go out into what I see and experience as the concrete jungle and, you know, try not to burn it all down. So it's, you know, it really does help us, you know, stay rooted and act with, you know, precision and, you know, have that, like, patience, you know, so that, you know, we're not just, like, doing things, you know, just to do them, saying things just to say them, just performing your life, but really just having, like, a rooted life. For me, it's gonna have to be that music and really just my weekend, you know, when I'm not working. Do-dun-da, do-dun-da, do-dun-da. It's really nice. And I'll also bring it into some of the masculinity spaces that I'm in. So for me, I was invited to join this group back in 2018, the Black Men's Collective of Boston. I ended up founding it with two of my peers, Gene and JD. I know they're not here, but shout out to you guys. And they're still with us. They're doing well. They're very much still with us. Those spaces ended up being, like, you know, very sermon-like for me, very, like, soul food, very soul care, community care. Like I had mentioned earlier, they're once a month. And this is not even like a plug for the space at all. I just wanted to tell you about the practices that we are able to speak to each other, use vulnerability as a positive tool and not something that we're afraid to tap into, and also, you know, use other tactics through arts and culture. And I'll name a few right now that we've done. We've definitely done music making. We've had drum circles. We've had making vitamin-rich snacks together, not a meal, but something you can take quickly on the go, because again, we're in Boston and everything is eating our time up. Herbalism for seasonal depression with one of my peers who does herbalism as a life practice, and so many more things, but really just having a group that you can meet with some normalcy and be able to commit to a growth. And what can those growths be? You know, those growths can be, you know, growing in more of a healthy masculinity and identifying those pathways with other men and other masculine folks, you know, within the Black community, because our masculinity can very much be divine. And I want, you know, for any of the men and people being very centered in their masculinity to just know that, you know, you may be on a divine masculine journey, whether you realize it today or not. And you may have other language to call that too. But energetically, I encourage you to keep doing that. You know, keep feeding yourself, keep feeding your soul in those communal spaces. You're not alone. I'm not alone. And I had to teach myself that, you know, over time. Definitely like that pandemic piece of that 2020, 2021, and 22 time frame allowed for a lot of extra time, the time that we're actually owed right now, to be able to step into that divine ways of being and growing those, you know, those tactics for ourselves. It's definitely a mechanism of the system to make sure we have no time to explore our actual ancestral gifts and where they can take us.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think everyone here can agree. The noise is real, and it's coming at us all the time. And I think it's our responsibility for ourselves to stay in silence, as was said here. Everyone is, you know, to take time to just move away from it, shut it off, sit in silence. I mean, I was one of those people, you come from outside, I go home and I automatically start doing again. And before you know it, it's 11:30 and I've got Murder, She Wrote on the TV because that's the only thing that can relax me. But now I've come to understand that, yeah, come inside from the noise. You've created this space. Lay down, breathe, recognize your home, recognize you're safe. And this is not for everyone because you've got a 2-year-old that's mad, that's crazy. I mean, you grab your piece when you can. But the thing is but when you do, you take a hold of it and you grab it. And I think that's what we've all got to learn how to do, is to take that stillness, that peace, grab it and take a hold of it when we can. Sit still. It's crazy at first because you want to put that TV on and you want to put that radio on and the thoughts are racing, but sit still. And I think when you sit still, you connect divinely to you, and then you're able to connect divinely to other people too.
Thanks for that, Michele. You know, Gio mentioned one of our elders in the space, Lula Christopher, who I'm deeply a product of working with her so closely, and also from a spiritual perspective. But another elder in the space is Dr. Jimadari Kamara, who is a very dear mentor of mine. And he always says, you have to take care of your spirit. Find things to care for your spirit. Stay in that spirit, stay in that uplifting space. And I think that's important. And my Boston big sister is here, Gigi. And she always has a way of quieting the noise around her, which is impressive to me, because she has been that forever. I think when folks figure it out, like I have seen in these folks that I just mentioned, it's wonderful to then try to practice that and follow it. Before I go into the next one, I want to give a shout out to some sisters that are here from Girl Track and from the Finishers Fit Club, who I have not seen in a long time. So I want to thank you for being here. Now we're going to get into the nitty gritty. Let's get into the nitty gritty. The question. The question.
I'm scared
in
now.
this time of fear and erasure of the Black experience, how do we ground ourselves in our divinity? And I'll let whoever wants to get it first. Let's get in it.
Repeat it again. Just repeat the question again.
I thought it was a really one. In this time of fear and erasure of the Black experience, how do we ground ourselves, our community, in our divinity? So how do we, when we're hearing all these messages that are saying we're not worthy, we're not smart, that we have studied and we only get to where we are because of being Black, not based on the work we put in. So what are the things we have to say to each other? What are the things we have to say to the community to stay grounded in our truth and not take that in?
I'll start, but you'll have to come back to me too, because I know I'm gonna have some other thoughts later. For me, like, a couple of things come up initially. So one is going back to what we were talking about related to ancestors, and recognizing that the reason why we are here, the reason why we are where we are, is because there are people who come before us who have struggled, who have experienced, so much, and who we can learn from and draw on when we think about how we can and will move forward. And so studying and learning and reflecting on the lessons that we can learn from previous experiences, to me, is a really important piece of this. Another thing is surrounding ourselves with people who uplift us, with people who affirm us, with people who see our divinity, and not people who don't. And reminding ourselves of our purpose, reminding ourselves what we are here for. Reminding ourselves of our purpose. When I think about that, there is the work piece, which is its own thing, but there also is, just the life piece of it, and thinking about, why am I here? What is my purpose? What am I really here to do? And how can I stay focused and stay committed and stay true to that and allow that to guide me? And I think for me, recentering around my purpose is what helps me to not be distracted by the noise, to not be internalizing all of those negative messages, all of those false messages that we are continuously inundated with. We're inundated with these messages that you describe now, but these messages have always been there. And for me, really recentering and refocusing on my purpose and letting that be kind of the compass that guides me is what has helped me to move forward and to counteract those other narratives.
Yeah. I'm just also taking in what you just said. Appreciate that too. I would have to say, when I think about gathering as a method to sort of insulate, insulate our community from the onslaught of outward attacks. Some of them have been more historical and long-standing. Others are a new and maybe more refreshing and maybe more personal attacks on our mental, spiritual health, and more. I definitely think that gathering in places of education, community education in particular. I have the privilege of co-creating and co-hosting a series of Wednesday workshops through my job, the Boston Ujima Project. We are a Black-led organization, and I feel like that needs to be named just because there is a certain intentionality with how we curate our cooperative economic programs through our cultural competence and being able to inform, those financial practices by things that you might only hear, in houses of worship or perhaps other community spaces. You might, even just the word Ujima. Some people is like, oh, why only one part of Kwanzaa? And I'm just saying, this has been a word and a phenomenon for X amount of years, an undetermined amount of years, because this extends, beyond language. Ujima means collective work and responsibility. And I know that for me and my immediate community in our ecosystem, we take it upon ourselves to be sure to circulate education from our peers, from other Black and other indigenous and people of color who do the grassroots work, okay? They don't need certain stamps of approval to be up in certain spaces. We are curating the space, the table, if you will. We have gone ahead and built our own tables, circulate the blueprints for those tables in our communities so that no one ever has to ask, well, where's my seat? Well, you helped build this table, so take that seat for yourself. Now, I want to give some more examples just about remaining positive. I would just have to go back to prayer and meditation and just reminding ourselves, who we are, where we've come from, and where we are intending to go. It's really important to just sit there and just say your name to yourself. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe you'll get to know that on your own terms, okay? I also think that assembling people, even if it's not just for education. Just have like a nice tea time. The weather's getting nicer. So hopefully, the allergies don't bother you too much, but go and sit by a nice tree. I know I will. I will go sit by a tree. I will bring a certain set of percussion items. I'll go through a set of natural processes that I may have just made up on the spot because I was just guided simply by the elements of what I was feeling that morning and that daytime, and even also that evening time. Because, gathering and engaging in healing practices of just talking positively about yourself and about other people's and about your community is really great. I grew up with all types of names being, for neighborhoods of Boston, terrible names. I'm not going to repeat them, but, Mattapan, there's a name for that, from the news, Dorchester, Roxbury. I've had great experiences there, and I've had sour experiences everywhere because, that's just nature. You know what I'm saying? So gather in the spaces that other people have told you, oh, that's the bad places, oh, that crime and all that stuff. Displace that energy. Gather. Go to that park where they said, oh, well, people used to get shot there all the time. I was just like, well, not today, okay? And just be defiant about that and gather and show up for each other in those ways. I used to work with teens in Roxbury at my previous job, and that was a big thing for one of our summers, really just displacing the hotspot energy. That's what the authorities call it in Boston. They call them hotspots. It's like, all right, we'll cool it down. Let's bring some music making out here. Let's bring some food. Let's feed our immediate community members in these areas. Really just bring that cookout energy everywhere you go. And that really does have a lasting impact on the smaller parts of our neighborhoods. And then hopefully, that can make a ripple effect for the rest of, cities and those larger societies.
Thanks, Gio. Michele?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to punctuate what was already said. And the thing that comes to my mind is, I am my brother's keeper. And I think community is key right now. Community is essential. It's essential for us to gather with each other, to be in spaces with each other. I have this wonderful hope that on Juneteenth, there's just going to be a nationwide boots on the ground line dance of folks we're just going to do it from state to state. That's what we're going to do. And that's going to be our collective coming together. But apart from those spaces, you need to surround yourself with people who are affirming. You have to affirm, and you have to affirm with people, you have to affirm with yourself, you have to speak affirmation, you have to pray affirmation, you have to talk affirmation. It is essential for us to look out for each other. No matter what community you're in, to look out for each other. Community is essential. And I'll tell you all the date and time for that boots on the ground line dance.
She's been on that. We probably have a ReRooted event just for that. But what that then brings up is, where's the joy? Because joy is important. Laughter is important as we're facing these fear and the erasure and the anxiety, the intensity. I mean, you walk outside and it's palpitating. And in the midst of all of this, Black folks have always found joy. So where do you find your joy?
I find my joy in the mundane. I find my joy in the everyday things, which for me is important because, it doesn't have to be a big thing, right? I find joy in hearing my son laugh about some random thing. I find joy in seeing somebody with a cute outfit and me complimenting it, okay, yellow jacket, and and then laughing, and us having a moment without really saying much of anything. I find joy in experiences like this, gatherings like this. I find joy in music, not in my creation of it, but in my listening to it.
Not saying I don't sing.
I do not sing. I find joy in cooking to share with others. There's like a theme of with others here, right? I find joy in lots of places. And I really do think that one thing that is so powerful is being able to find that joy in the midst of all of this, being able to recognize that we can tap into, like, not only is it okay for us to tap into that joy in the midst of, all that's going on in the world, but it's necessary for us to tap into that joy in the midst, or because of all that's going on in the world. And that doing so is not only an act of divinity, but it's also a revolutionary act. Right? It also is an act of resistance. And for me, engaging in that resistance is personally important and personally meaningful. And tapping into joy is one way of doing that.
Gio and Michele, and then we're gonna jump in to.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a lot of affirmation of what you already shared. Made me feel joyful too. I definitely find joy in some plant-based kind of, like, I won't say cooking because the stove is not on. Preparing certain foods. I still eat animal protein, but I really put a lot of emphasis on balancing that out with fruits and vegetables. So I'll put on music, while the knives are already sharp. I've got a melon of sorts, some berries of sorts, and hopefully, something else to supplement that, for my vitamins and my nutrients, because I do have to feed myself joy too. I make it a whole thing, and my partner knows, she's here right now. It's like my fruit bowls, at this point are famous in our household, and I can't go to work without that joy, that practice that I've, poured into in that morning. I really just can't, do those things properly without having, just like that moment, with that sustenance, how I'm feeding myself. And maybe that, can manifest in your lives in your own ways too. Maybe it's not that fruit in the morning. Maybe it's your favorite cereal. It's just how you start your day. It can be really a big game changer of how you set that first foot outside of bed that morning. And then even like how I end my night. Have I gone ahead and made a distinction between when my work day ended and when my night began? Or are those emails still going off? Okay, did I set that phone, that radioactive device in this pocket, that I set that on a non-disturbing kind of stage so that I can go ahead and take on the joy of the evening or the end of the day? And I know folks work on all hours of the time, so make that distinction for yourself. Mark the end of work, if possible. Please mark that for yourself so that you can settle into the, oh yeah, now I can start thinking about like that bike I wanted to ride, Or like, oh, I'm gonna call my aunt who I have, like, her birthday's like coming up soon, see what she's doing. And just allow yourself that break, from the day to day. And when I say day to day, perhaps I should just name it as the status quo. The status quo that we here experience in Boston, that we experience in the Northeast region of what is now called the United States, this empire. We do need a break from that because, it seems like a lot of things are, I'm just going to motion it. I'm not even going to say those things because I want to speak more power into our solution making, our community-based solutions. So please, listen to your body when it needs to say, okay, no more texts. Okay, decrease the amount of channels that your energy is extended into. I closed up that Facebook. I closed that IG, Instagram. In 2021, I decreased the amount of spaces where my energy was being stretched thin. that is going to allow for more joy to be welcomed in. So also think about how am I welcoming joy and preparing for it to find me.
Michele. And if folks want to start putting in their questions, because after Michele, we're going to go into Q&A. Michele, your joy.
For me, there are two things I found my joy in, which I never thought I would. The first thing is prayer. Like, I did not believe in the power of prayer. And factually, I thought it was funny and odd, and I made many attempts in my life to pray, and I would feel frustrated because I did not know what to say or who I was saying it to. And then I just got to it, and now it's joy. It's joy to sort of just surrender my thoughts and my concerns and my fears to someone else, and that's brought me a lot of great joy, and I actually look forward to it, and it's something that I never thought I would. I didn't think I'd find joy in prayer. And the other thing that I find myself joyful about is nature. I mean, I'm a Brooklyn girl. I don't fool around with nature. But oddly enough, I live across the street from a park, one of the biggest parks in Brooklyn. And I go there, and it brings me so much joy to just walk in silence and witness nature as it shifts and changes. And so those are the two things that have brought me joy, where I find joy.
So the last question before we go in to the Q&A to the audience: how do we bring the community along with us? How do we walk with community in divinity? You've touched on it, but I think a little bit more specific, because not all of us are in the same place. Not all of us have the same tools to navigate the noise that we're experiencing. So the three of you have shared your tools. So how do you share that tool with community? How do you bring the community along with wherever they're at with you?
I think bringing the community along, I mean, for me, I think everyone sort of has to do the work to put in the time, because community isn't just singular, right? It's like all of us. And so just how you were saying, you're at this part of your life, you're at this part of your life, I'm at this part of my life, and they're all at these different stages of our lives. And so the thing is, how can we affirm each other in those different stages? How can we speak positivity to each other, hold each other's hands, lift each other up in these spaces? How can we advocate for each other? I mean, that's how we pull each other through this stage of how we gonna make it, and that's how we gonna make it, because we're going to affirm each other in all those stages. So my piece gets shared with them, their piece gets shared with me, their struggle, their story gets shared, and then solutions get shared, all these things get shared if we're in community. And we have to honor everyone's different stage. That's key. We have to honor each other's stages.
In thinking that, something that you just said is part of the bringing community along is unmasking ourselves and being fully vulnerable and transparent in how this is all affecting us. Like, not trying to hide. This is not time to hide. that this is causing pain, this is causing fear, this is causing anxiety. And I think being honest in that way is also how we bring community along, because we've been told that that level of transparency and vulnerability is a weakness. But I think for Black people, it's been a strength to be able to let it go, dance it out, cry it out, and then pull ourselves together, because we don't have time to sit in a corner and not move. So we have to figure that out, but to give ourselves the space to have that moment of breakdown, of crying. And I don't know about anybody else, but in these, since January, there's been a whole lot of crying on this end. Because as James started, we are talking about us as Black people. But I think the conversation is also us as human beings.
Right, right,
When does humanity show up
right.
in this noise? Because humanity is divinity.
The ultimate.
Absolutely. So when does our humanity show up? And that's where I think if humanity was showing up more, we would have not only Black community walking with us, but anyone who acknowledges the humanity of the other.
Yeah. I really appreciate what you're saying. And like, just to build on to that even more, with this piece about humanity, I do really think that a part of our divinity is our ability to see the humanity in other people. And to me, the more that we are vocal about that, the more that we not even necessarily are vocal, but do that through our actions, I think the more that can rub off on other people who are open to it. And so I see a lot of it as kind of leading by example, doing by example. And I appreciate the piece of the importance of being vulnerable and of sharing kind of the intentionality and the emotionality that comes with that. Because I think a lot of times, at least for myself, I might think like, oh, I am leading by example, or I'm just, doing what I do, but not showing that vulnerable side, or not sharing, all of the other things that I might be holding while I'm doing what I do. And I think that both of those pieces, it is important for those to coexist. The vulnerability with the example and with the demonstration of how I see the humanity in other people through, the work that I do, through the ways that I interact with other people, and at the same time being able to hold the pain that can come with being able to see the humanity in other people.
Yeah, and I think also with community, it's for us to be able to say to each other, I am scared, I am angry. This all feels uncertain to me. And so I think that's an important thing for us to share with each other, because that's how we can be there for each other through community. Yeah.
We have some great questions. So I'm going to shoot first two. Can you speak more to the Black divinity being inherent and not just resistance?
Yeah, so I think I had mentioned that that part. So I guess I would say I was saying not just as a response or not just reactionary. So to me, I don't see Black divinity as just a response to all of the negative messages that we receive about ourselves, that now we have to say like we are divine because people are saying that we are not, or people are saying that we are unintelligent, or are insert negative stereotype here, right? That our divinity exists because we exist. Our divinity is inherent within us, and not just a reactionary thing that we say to uplift ourselves, that it is true in our essence, and that it's important to me to remember that, and not just uplift the divinity in response to or in reaction to or in rejection of all of the negative things that are said about us, even though it is in direct opposition to all of those things. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Gosh, these are some really good questions. How do you deal with growing out of one community into growing into another, which might not be blood or family tied?
I like to open this up. Yeah. As someone that intentionally, took myself away from a religious community that I had grown up in, because I could feel that I had reached somewhat of a plateau, something of a ceiling in regards to my spiritual growth and health. I said, I'm not flourishing here. Being able to recognize that in my own way, in our own ways, is very important. And I didn't feel like I had to make some sort of grand performance or grandstand, you see some of these funny videos where someone leaves work ceremoniously, like the guy who hired a mariachi band to leave work. So I think that just like being authentic, to your next stage, and honoring, the discomfort that comes with that. People look at you, you're reading that? Does God say that? Looking at a book that perhaps is on a traditional African belief system. I had that said to me verbally today. Yeah, right. It's the challenges and the joys are every day, okay? It's every day. And being it's not so much that you're okay with it, that it's a matter of life science, that there will always be a challenge, there will always be a discomfort on your journey to your higher self. I also want to shout out another tool. I know vulnerability was mentioned earlier. I wanted to mention childhood as well. Am I honoring my childhood self, in what I wanted to be and feel like? I really wanted to go out with my friends more, so I'm gonna do that more, okay? I really wanted to be outside more, so I'm gonna do that more, and I'm gonna choose those spaces where I'm outside more. When I'm thinking of that discomfort of rerouting myself, and then where I'm ending up, hopefully it's with people that are on similar journeys. I mentioned one actual space earlier, the Erasure space. I also say, seek out groups, or build your own circle, having a circle chat, a fireside chat, coffee chats, all those are gonna really help you find your next level of community that do want to nurture and support your growth. Especially for folks, and now I'm gonna get more specific, especially for folks who are looking to decolonize their lifestyles and go back and fetch some of those ancestral gifts. They're not cut off. You're not cut off from the source. It was just temporarily interrupted. It's always there for you to go back and get it. And what that it is for you to figure out for your own self. Yes, you can call it an ancestral gift, but please don't sit on that gift. Like they say, in the Bible even, you're sitting on your talents. It's under a bucket. You're not sharing it with your community. If you're reading and you're gaining knowledge and such, be sure to, role model that with how you lead yourself in the community, how I'm leading in the community, without it being like an ego thing, or an extreme ego thing, I should say. There is a healthy ego, and that can be fed. And I think I kind of mentioned some of those examples earlier.
Michele, you want to do a quick answer, and then we're going to go to Elizabeth and close it out?
I'm going to have to ask you to repeat that question.
Well, I'm going to give you another one.
Okay.
Because this was your mastermind call for Soul Speak to be this. Are you walking away with an answer?
Yes. Yes. I'm walking away with what it means to be divine in this very uncertain time, and with tools to take away with. And the key factors for me are Community, important. Self is important. Stillness is important. Letting the noise out is important. But most important thing is vulnerability, because I don't always feel that I'm entitled to that vulnerability to say to people, you know what, I'm scared. This doesn't feel right to me. How do I get through this? You know, because we have all these political conversations with everyone, and you think, okay, you all are okay with this. You got it all figured out. You're dealing with this well. I'm reading the news, and I'm in pieces sometimes with what I witness and what I read. And, you know, I remember walking into a cafe, and folks were just laughing and having a good time. And I just wanted to shout, like, do you not all know what's happening in this world right now? But one of the things I've also come to understand is that it is very important to hold on to your peace. And as we've all said here, you've got to let the noise, you've got to sit out the noise and be still. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to bring Elizabeth up. Can we give a hand for Gio, Michele, and Tahira? And this week is an important week because in the midst of all of this, Saturday, well, the official day was Wednesday, yesterday, right? And Embrace Boston is about to celebrate the anniversary of the Freedom Rally. So I wanted to bring Elizabeth up to share a few thoughts, not just based on this conversation, but how this is connected to what Embrace is about to do on Saturday. So Elizabeth Blank.
I'm just going to say a little bit of calling out, lifting back up a lot of the themes, reoccurring ideas that I heard you all speak and share with us. And then I'll say a little bit about the rally and just close with something that I think is very connected to what you said around divinity being inherent. But what I heard this evening and what I'm so grateful to be able to have heard, you know, there was a lot of themes around prayer, but also the understanding that that's about a relationship first and foremost, and it's also about discipline. It's about learning and unlearning, about divorcing from worldly things that are created to define how we're supposed to move through a divine space, when in reality, it's actually about rejecting all of those definitions and deepening your relationship. For me, it's with God. I heard a lot about sharing, serving in community. I'm a big love language person, and my husband's love language is acts of service. And that has been complicated for me a little bit in my marriage, but not in community. I think I've always been a person who is acts of service, but it was really hard for me to understand how my partner received love through acts of service. So it's really important to remember that it's also about community care. I really appreciate that note there. And then we talked about ancestry and ancestry living inside of us, around us, within nature and water was a big theme. And I think a lot of quotes I wrote down, but recognizing your home, that one struck me deep, because in the context of the conversation, it was about physically being in your house, but I know what you really deeply meant is those moments of plugging out and into something deeper, recognizing that you're home and that you're safe. And And then the one that is so important to the work that I do every day, especially with Embrace, but just as a human being, is the joy piece. And that really joy is how it's a choice, right? It's how we choose to do things. It's been described as an act of resistance, and it very much is, but it's not in the sense that it's in opposition to anything that's been put on us. It's actually a choice that we've done for forever. Worship brings a sense of joy that is inexplicable quite often, extends beyond any of our understanding. And so I think that choosing to show up in joy is something that I think about when I think about the rally that we're hosting on Saturday at the Boston Common. And so Embrace Boston with a number, over 100 partners. This is really an effort that takes community to come together and put together. Originally, for those of you who don't know, April 23rd, which was yesterday, which also happened to be my birthday, thank you, is the 60th anniversary of the 1965 Freedom Rally and March in Boston, which was led by Martin Luther King and local civil rights activists like Virgil Wood and Ruth Batson. And so what started as an opportunity for us to really commemorate this moment and lift that legacy up has very much transformed into a new call to action, right? Because we are living amongst all of the turmoil that is being uplifted, rerouted, brought back, double back, rewound, fast forward, it's coming back and at us again, as we've seen it, as our ancestors have endured, and they walked for us, and so we're choosing to walk again. And so we'll start actually at Copley Square on the Boylston side around 10:30. We're gonna march. A beautiful thing that our city is gonna do is also rename the corner of Boylston Street and Charles Street, which is the entrance to the Boston Common to 1965 Freedom Rally Square, which is amazing because that's another way, right, that we call our ancestors and that we remember and reveal the history that has always existed in our organisms, in our nature. And then we'll proceed into the Boston Common for a full rally. And the reason why I'm connecting that to joy is really because as a Black-led organization, again, like Ujima, we choose to show up. We choose to gather how we inherently exist in joy. And so having a DJ out on the Common, line dancing is actually a part of the run-up show. And we're also very conscious that this is probably gonna be one of the largest gatherings of folks of color intentionally since the inauguration of our president, or since the election. And so we call people out. Take this as an invitation right now that we must gather, that as we are exhausted and scared, that we cannot sit down and we cannot sit out. It's not a choice. I feel honored and privileged. I feel terrified. I'm marching for those who also had to flee the country as of recently because their inability to exist here any longer. And so I know that we're also asking folks to come out and put their bodies on the line. And so we're working to make sure that there is as much safety precautions as possible, and we're grateful to our partners that are gonna help us do that. And so in my closing, just to come back to the divine especially, I'm just gonna tell a quick story. Recently, someone gave me a postcard. I'm not gonna say the full story, right? Because I was processing as the gift was being given to me. A postcard of a painting from a church in Europe somewhere of the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus, that the Virgin Mary's skin was brown. And this person is, and so this particular one wasn't actually that. Originally, it was painted like very Eurocentric with white skin. And you probably know the story better than mine. So this person is sitting there and telling me the story that originally this painting looked this way, and they wanted to gift it to me because, and that what happened one point in history is that this church caught on fire and the painting was affected. And so the paint on the actual surface was burned, and that they revered it because this was like the real representation, right? And the painting hadn't diminished in the fire. And I'm listening to this person and I'm practicing all of my somatic work and I'm being so grateful. And I'm like, thank you. Put this in my pocket. But one of the things that in that divine moment, right, because the Spirit will talk to you, especially in those moments, it took for them to burn a Black woman to realize her divinity when we already knew forever that we were in fact divine. And I feel deeply in this moment that we are absolutely in the fire, that we are being pushed and pushed towards the fire, and that we are being tested to see if we will get through the fire as our ancestors have and will continue to do. And just a deep, deep, deep reminder from the divine that there is always another in the fire with you.